everyone, I'm Allison. Thanks for joining me for Where I'm From 112 with Rebekkah. I am reading Old Enough by Haley Jacobson, which is a story kind of like coming of age. She's a 20, and it's really a story about how you change and how you evolve and how this person you thought was your best friend and this life you thought was going to be your life forever, well, that isn't necessarily true. And it's enjoyed it, and Rebekah's trying to join me. Third time's gonna be a charm. I keep getting third time was a charm. Hi, Rebekkah.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. It's been an hour since I last saw you.
Very true.
You look lovely as usual. I'm
Oh,
always
thank you.
impressed with your looks when
Oh,
I'm on Zoom with you.
that's
Yeah.
very kind. I feel like often Allison and I are in a weekly writing group, and often I feel like I've just come back from the gym and I look very disheveled, so that's nice to hear.
No, I think you look must with like intention.
Okay.
I don't think you
All
look disheveled. So I'm just gonna
I'll take it.
say that.
I'll take it.
I was just looking at your poem, and I think I might cry.
I have to say I'm a little scared about reading it
I just
for
was
that
like,
same reason.
oh no, I'm gonna cry. I think I'm gonna cry. Also, it's just a very emotional week. We can all acknowledge like what is
Yes.
happening
Yes.
and in
Yeah.
the Middle East and how it's
Yes.
horrific, and it's just with us. This
Absolutely.
feeling of
Deep, deep, deep
fragility.
grief and sadness.
Yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah. So I'm already. So the pump is already primed.
Same. Same. There have been a lot of tears
Yeah,
this week. Yeah.
I'm sure.
For me as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So that being said, did you want to say anything else before you read it to get more comfortable? Or you just want to go?
No, I think we can just
Okay.
dive.
Okay. And if I don't cry, it's only because I held it together. Because the intention, I'm not going to spoil the ending, but I was like, oh God. So
We'll see how I do as well, like
okay.
I said.
Okay.
Okay. So should I go?
Yeah.
Great. Okay. I am from coffee and muesli, eggs in a cup, and toast soldiers, Canadian bacon and sausage links, homemade muffins, and pineapple orange banana juice. I am from a house on a New Hampshire hill, rural, gray, and once painted blue. I am from Robert Frost, from daffodils and fir trees and snow, which die or shed or melt, but always return. I am from an also blue house in California, surrounded by a tall white fence and vines and roses that crawl and crawl. I am from Silicon Valley, the freeze of the Pacific Ocean, poppies, redwood trees, and the mountains they line. I am from the unique bouquet of these scents, the reasons why people will, despite it all, always want to live in California. I'm from big Passover Seders and effusive Christmases, love and food, from Patricia and Robert, Natalie and Samuel, from Michael and Alana. I'm from intellectuals and stoics, immigrants and transplants, engineers and artists, from books and language and words and words. I'm from Jews and Irish Catholics, those cast out and annihilated again and again. I'm from Harvard, from Brooklyn, from Indiana, from shtetls, from stone farms and peat moss, from pogroms and famine. Kugel and challah, potatoes and beer, from the love of two people who lost their first child, who were pushed apart by grief, from a mother who knew she had to try and create a life again, and a father who wasn't sure he ever wanted to, but who held me to his chest and rocked me for hours every night when I would not sleep. From a mother who stayed, who started over, even though she didn't have to. From a father who left, even though I would have given him my soul if he would have stayed, whom I came to realize I had believed was my very soul. I believed my heart required his chest to beat, or I would die, until I discovered I had my own. I am from Cyrus as much as he is from me, my son, who has already exceeded me, who is the future.
You did it.
I did it. I mean,
Whenever people talk about their kids,
I know. Yeah.
like I'm okay with all the family dysfunction of the past. That doesn't usually get me, but man, the minute people start talking about their kids, it's like, it's so emotional.
It
for me.
is. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I definitely cried a little bit writing that, for sure. Yeah.
and I loved how you said you're as much from him as he is from you. Like, I don't know. I mean, I think part of the reason I get so emotional is because of that recognition of my own childhood self that I didn't have as a child, but seeing it in them, I'm able to, it's able to permeate.
Like you're able to
Yeah.
experience it again. Yeah. Or for the first
Yeah.
time, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. And just sort of that childhood innocence and
Yeah.
joy and, because I was in survival most of the time. And so it's a beautiful thing, childhood.
Mm-hmm. I remember when I was pregnant with Cyrus, there's so much emphasis in all the parenting books and philosophy, around how to parent and what parenting style you should have, how to teach your children things. And it occurred to me at a certain point, I remember even journaling this. I was like, I am really interested actually in what he's going to be teaching me, and trying to view the relationship and the dynamic as more reciprocal. And that's what I mean when I'm like, he's already just, I'm like, he's doing stuff I never did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was beautiful. I feel like that goes without saying, but I also think it's nice to say it. Beautiful, emotional. And for me, since I know you, because Rebekah and I became acquainted through each other's writing, I know a lot of this, but I think it's always special to see how it comes together because we tell the story so many different ways depending on the form and all of those things. So that was it's a fun discovery, even though I know a lot of the biographical details. So what was it like for you writing with a prompt? Isn't it fun?
It is fun, but I felt very much, kind of like what you were describing about, kind of knowing the pieces of the story, having read my writing, but seeing it uh, formulated in this way, for me, writing it gave me kind of a new perspective on different aspects of it. It was especially lovely kind of writing about both sides of my family and sort of thinking about like this structure and this problem really made me think about the unique way we all get all of these different sort of influences and pieces of history from the different sides of our family, and then the ways that they overlap too, which is something that I sort of always knew in terms of like having this one side of my family Russian Jewish, other side Irish Catholic, very different and very similar at the same time.
Yeah.
So
because it happens a fair amount.
It does.
Those two ending up together.
Yes.
So it is interesting, and thinking of the persecution of both peoples, like obviously different, but and it is like in their Irish Catholics and that's my father's side, so I'm more familiar with it as a family trait, but like it's in their bones, like the bad news is coming.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
It's only just give us a minute.
Yep.
Yep. And I definitely took that on. So, and I loved all the smells of Northern California. I went to San Francisco last summer, not this summer, and I don't even know what the smell was, but I was like, because it had been a while since I had been there, and it was just like, oh, this place. I mean, it really did fill me with nostalgic joy.
Yeah, there is such a specific scent
Yeah.
in the air here that I had a cousin who had lived up here in Northern California who had moved to the Midwest. And when she first came back to visit, she said to me, it smells so specific. Like, this is the smell of home for me. And I was kind of like,
Yeah.
oh, because I was a kid then and I hadn't spent that much time probably outside of California. And now it's
Yeah.
something I notice every time I leave and come back. It's like, oh, the
And
smell of home.
we were in Muir Woods and we were like coming down the back side and it was,
Yeah.
that field of whatever that plant is. I was just like, it was powerful. And I love that that's the reason that we all want to live in California. It's like the list is getting longer every day, but
Yeah.
it's like, okay, yeah. Also the smell, because we haven't, for me, growing up in Southern California, it was orange blossoms, which you're hard
Yeah.
pressed to come across now. But that smell wafted through the air for miles.
Yeah.
And there
Yeah.
is a magical feeling of being in a place where things are growing.
Yes.
Always.
Yes. Yes. And the mountains is something else that's so distinct to me.
Yeah.
The mountains.
Yeah.
California.
Because I
Like,
was just in a conversation. Go ahead.
oh no, just having that as your background. And again, so notable for me when I go to the Midwest or other places that are flat.
I know.
It's like,
Yeah. Yeah. I was just in a conversation about how sad it must be living here with no seasons, which is I'm sure, a conversation you've been in many, many times. I find
yeah,
I'm in it quite often. And there are seasons, but they're just not
they're
the ones that
subtle.
we are narratively accustomed to.
In some ways you almost pay closer attention to the little
Definitely.
details. Like, it to me very much now feels like October.
Oh, for
Like,
sure.
no, it's October,
Oh, yeah.
even though it's all very subtle. The change in the light and
The light.
yeah, the quality of the air or something is also just
Yeah.
different. But
And
yeah,
right now we are blessed that we are not having
yeah,
fires, which is often also
yeah,
this time of year. Um,
yes,
so I'm really trying to breathe in that I'm getting to enjoy it this time of year that I love, but is now really associated with fires because of the
yeah,
past years.
yeah.
Um, so I'm just like, okay, let's
Can I
keep going.
Can I ask you? You've probably told me, but I don't totally recall how you started this and what
Oh,
made you
sure.
decide to want to use this prompt.
Yes, it's I was doing this forum with Janine Ouellette, who you may or may not know, the writer and memoirist, a teacher. She had posted on Facebook that she was leading this free forum on Zoom,
Uh-huh.
Project for Advancing Health Stewardship, which is about narrative medicine, which is
Right.
the term I'd never heard of. But when I looked it up, thought, oh, this is really something for me, because I've had lots of interactions with the medical system, and some amazing, some crushing.
Right.
And so I went, and it was during COVID, and it was free, and I liked Janine, and I went. And in the forums, you do a close reading of a text
Mm-hmm.
and then a writing prompt inspired by that text. So one of the first ones we did was this poem, and they used this prompt.
Okay.
And we went out to breakout rooms, which I don't think we did any other time, but with this one we did. And I was in a breakout room with a woman I knew from social media. So we just started gabbing, right, about the foods we ate when we grew up. Like, because that's one of the first
Right.
things. And she is also a food writer. So she was talking about all the things, and I was talking about ragu spaghetti sauce. And then we came back to share our writing, and I had nothing to share. Because I'd been talking with her,
Instead
and
of writing.
yes, and I listened to everyone's poem who wanted to share, and I was moved by them. Like, I was just like, wow, we wrote for 7 minutes, nothing very long. And I've always had this feeling that we all have stories, right?
Yeah.
Like, that this whole kind of gatekeeping,
Absolutely.
that certain people are writers and certain people aren't, is gross, and I don't like it. Like, it's meant to keep people out.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
let's let them in, because those are actually the stories I'm interested in hearing. So I was meditating, it's going to get a little woo. And
I'm always down for woo, as you know. Another thing coming
right.
most of my life in California.
Right. Yeah. It's sort of required, I think. I mean, I'm sure there are people who live here who are like, ugh, but it was very much part of my life and still is to some extent. So I was meditating, and it was like, you know, how it happens when you're meditating, things just appear in your consciousness.
Yes.
Like things that you have never thought, just like ding. And
yep.
it was like, oh, what if you just ask people if they wanted to share a poem? You could use the prompt, and it'd be fun. You could just do it on Instagram Live, just see if anyone's interested, you know. And my logical brain's like, no one's going to be interested. But the meditating brain was like, just do it. So then I just reached out, and people did it. There was like an immediate response.
Yeah.
And I think for me, it's really been about the power of listening. So many people are just excited to have someone listen to them, and that's your job. Like, that's what I'm here for, you know. And
receiving. Yeah.
And also, I am not giving edits, because sometimes people will send me their poem and say, like, what do you think? They don't really do it anymore, earlier on. And I was just like, it's great. Whatever poem you want to share is the poem I want to hear. And I realized that I was creating a space that I needed, as we do.
Yeah. Yes.
Because I need to, I'm definitely outward facing. Like, I have to listen to everyone else's story. And then I realize, oh, I also have a story that I want to tell.
Right.
So
has doing this generated or shifted any of your approach, like, to your memoir that you're writing?
Sure. Yes. Yeah, it's been, I was just in this forum. It's funny because this forum that I'm talking about with Janine, I guest facilitated this week. It was my turn to be the person with the poem and the prompt, all those things. So it's come full circle. And I think it has conditioned me in a way that no reading of books or conversation can do, to realize that there is no detail too small. Never when someone's reading their poem do I think, ugh, I don't want to hear about the flowers where you grew up. I'm always like, tell me more about this. And that's how we feel as readers, right? We want to know.
Absolutely.
And specific details. We're told it again and again and again in writing classes. Get specific, get personal. And this has really, it's true. There is universality in the specificity.
I'm thinking too, you know, the writer Dani Shapiro has a podcast, and where she interviews mostly other writers, but not all the time. And she always asks them, the first thing she asks them is, describe to me the landscape of your childhood.
Oh, interesting. And
the responses she gets are just fascinating. And I felt to some extent like this poem prompt sort of elicited some of that as well. Like you were saying, like thinking about the foods you ate as a child, stuff like that is totally interesting and gives you such a sense of what someone's childhood and experience were like, but you don't really think about that. Those, like you're saying, those small details, especially if you were like, you know, sit down and write about your childhood, you probably wouldn't first think about like, what did we always have for breakfast? But it kind of, once you think about that, it unlocks something. And I think it is very fascinating for the reader.
And that's what I love about prompts. When they're working well, that's what they're doing, right? They're unlocking something that you couldn't get access to otherwise, that you're just sitting there going, so where am I from? You know, I mean, I don't know. I would have said the water still, like that features heavily in my poem because water is so important to me. But I don't think I would have. I might have just been like the ocean. not the specifics of it. So, and I love that. What is landscape of your childhood like? I'm mentoring a young woman through an organization, and she was saying she just did an icebreaker where everyone was asked what the story of their name is.
Oh, that's lovely. Yeah.
And I want to start asking everyone, what's the story of your name, Rebekkah? I want to know everyone's story of their name because everyone has a story. If
Yeah.
you want to share yours, I'd love to hear.
I have a interesting name story. Yeah.
Of course you do. I mean, you are also a very word-centric family. So
Yeah.
I'm guessing that naming was taken very seriously.
Well, actually, so because, as I mentioned in the poem, my parents had lost their first child very unexpectedly, stillbirth. When my mother got pregnant with me, she kind of was actually like, I don't want to really do any tests or anything because I did everything right the first time and it did. So they didn't want to basically know whether I was a boy or a girl, whether, nothing. So they didn't know for sure that I was going to be a boy or girl, but my mom was convinced I was going to be a boy. Mm-hmm. She was just like, I just feel it. And the way I'm carrying her. And so she had just kind of like decided that. And my father's father had died just a few months prior. And so they said, we're going to name this child after him. So I was supposed to be named Robert. And my mom was like already calling me that, like in utero. And then when I came out, the doctor's like, it's a girl. My mom was even like, no, she's not a girl. They're like, no, it's definitely a girl.
Yeah.
And thankfully, she and my dad were like, Roberta.
I was gonna say, how did you manage not to be a Roberta? Because that's where
it is my middle name.
No.
Thankfully not to end up being my first name.
No offense to any Robertas out there.
So, and then my mom's grandmother had recently passed away, and her name was Rebekkah, Yiddish, was called Becky. And so they decided to name me Rebekkah, but again, very indicative of my parents. We had like a second cousin who had been named, who was born like 2 months before me, who was named Rebekkah, lived in a totally different part of the country. We barely saw these people. But my dad said, we can't name her Rebekkah because this cousin's named Rebekkah. So their compromise was that they would spell my name with 2 K's and an H.
I check the spelling of your name every time I write it. I think I'm now to the point where I trust myself, but I am sensitive to it because I spell my name unusually as well.
Yeah.
So I am always like, because there are those of us who are in a club whose names get misspelled
all
often.
The time. Yeah.
It's like in your email address, but then it's like, hi, it's spelled wrong.
I know. So irritating. It's so
irritating. When I do spell someone's name wrong, if I feel so bad, like, oh no, I try so hard. So I love the way your name is spelled. And as a person whose mother changed her name when she was young and then changed it again, and everyone changed their names, and so there was lots of trips to the numerologist, I think that your name is very powerfully spelled. So yes. Take that. 2 K's and an H.
Yeah.
You're grounded. Because numerologists love H's.
Oh, okay.
And love names that end in H's because you're grounded.
I know that. Okay.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
So your parents did it right, is what I'm telling you.
Well, I've always so. Yeah. And then, so wait, you're saying your name was changed?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, it was on the table. I went to the numerologist.
They said don't change.
No. She wanted to change the hell out of my name. She hated my last name, which I was very attached to. I was born with the last name Yester, like yesterday, and I loved it. I thought it was very unique and special. And she was like, well, you can add an S to it. Then you can keep it. And then she proceeded to just suggest so many names that are so strange that no child would ever want them. And I was like, 5, 6. And, I didn't want my name to be Hertha or whatever, name. Was her name, but I think she might have also suggested it to me. And the compromise was Leah because it ends in an H, and Leah Yesters. And I didn't want that to be my name. So I managed to kind of just let it ride, not commit to changing my name because my mom changed her name, my aunt, like their whole friend group.
Wow. Oh my.
and everyone's name started with an H, a Z, an R, and there were a couple P's, but like the whole group. And I can, and
Wow.
the names are like names that you don't like. My mom's boyfriend's name was Philo. That's not a name. Is that a name? I mean, it's a stretch. Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah. So I managed to hold on to Allison. I mean, I was like into it if I could change my name to Samantha, but that wasn't like
That
what I
wasn't what the
changed my name to.
numerologist was recommending.
No, there were no normal names. And I'm not even that big of a fan of normal, but I just sort of wanted to have a name that was a name that I could identify as a name
Mm-hmm.
that I'd heard before, ever, ever. So, no, I did not change my name. And my mom changed her name back when I was like 14 to her birth name.
To her birth
Yes.
name. Interesting.
And I think almost, well, not all of them, but a lot of them did change their names back at one point. Anyway, it was very...
Well, my mom changed her name.
Oh, shit.
And I've actually been reflecting a lot on that this week because, she was named Ellen at birth, a name she never connected with.
Sure.
Just never felt right to her.
Mm-hmm.
And then when she was 16, she went and lived in Israel. And the sort of Hebrew version of her name was Ilana, spelled Elanah. And that whole experience of her living in Israel was really transformative for her in general. And she kind of, I think, felt like she became herself there. And so when she came back, she decided to keep the name Ilana and ultimately legally changed it. So
I vastly prefer that name. Not that I get a vote, but I just want to say, like, it says a lot more about a person. Like, it feels more like a name and not just like a random, I don't know. I love it. I think it's a beautiful name.
It was so strange when growing up, my grandparents would slip and call her Ellen, which my grandmother did constantly, which says a lot about that dynamic. But I was always like...
And was she Jewish, your grandmother?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but did she just feel like, oh no, we're not doing this? Like, we're here now, we're doing Ellen.
I mean, I can't try and determine her.
You're not going to armchair psychoanalyze your grandmother? That's big of you. Way to go.
My grandmother was a very unique individual. I mean, I think sometimes it was genuinely slipping up. My mom's brother still occasionally also says Ellen, but it's just so weird to me because my mom is just not. She's just not an Ellen. She is Ilana. So
that's how I felt when people would ask me, "Do you want your parents to get back together?" I'd be like, "Ugh, gross." No, they got divorced when I was like 3. Ew. Ugh. So I mean, and when my mom changed her name, I was like the one who was policing, right? Like if people would use her name, her old name, Jane, I'd be like, I don't know who you're talking about. Her name is Zora. Okay.
Zora. With an H?
Oh yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. And I had no awareness of Zora Neale Hurston at that time. I was 6, so I had never heard of her. So I had no, like, once I became aware of Zora Neale Hurston later in life, I was like, what a badass name. But at 6, I was like, what is this name?
That's so funny.
So, yeah.
I also think it's fascinating. I was having this conversation last week with my mom and some other parents we were with for my son's school. When kids go through that like developmental stage of wanting a different name, and all 3 of us, me and my 2 sisters, went through this phase of like, no, I'm this. Mm-hmm. And there's this great story about my middle sister gave like the teachers at this like dance class she was taken to her new name. Mm-hmm. And a friend had dropped her off, and so my mom came to pick her up. She was like, here's my daughter, and she said my sister's name, and they're like, we don't have a name. And my mom I was like, what? What do you mean?
Yeah, panicked.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then was like, my mom's like, no, wait, I see my daughter. That's Ari. And they're like, no, that's not her name. I was like, I think I know.
Oh God, that's good. Names are wonderful, and I've always been obsessed with them. I had a baby name book when I was a child, and I would just read it, like, and what each name meant.
Yeah.
And so naming characters has always been
Yes.
like a serious. I do not love titling things at all,
But
I love naming characters.
yeah. Yeah. That's been fun part of the memoir process because I'm not using anyone's name. And I'm just like, what is the alternate name that still evokes this person? And to me, that's not their name. Yeah. Did you name your children before they were born, or did you decide once they were? Yes, that's what we did too.
And we talked about it a lot, and it was really just like the things that weren't vetoed by others.
I know. Well, that's such a hard part of that process too.
Because it would be funny. I'd be like, "How about this name?" You're like, "Oh,
yeah."
You know, I was definitely more of the name generator, and he was more of the
absolutely not
vetoer.
Yeah.
And it's funny because still certain names we will bring them up, and he'll joke about them, and our kids seem happy with the names. So I'm grateful for that. And one of them really went through the wanting to change the name phase, and it was just like hilarious because it was all tank engines.
I love that.
And it was like, you don't want your name to be Percy. I promise. I know it seems promising right now, but it's not I don't think that's going to be a long-term solution to your problem. So he's glad he didn't actually do it. No.
That's so funny. Yeah, I have a friend who she and her husband just had their second child, and at their baby shower, people kept obviously asking, as they do when you're pregnant.
No. And we never wanted to say, because you never want the person to go,
that's what she said. She's like, I'm not sharing any of the possibilities because I don't want to hear your...
Because they always do. They never can help themselves. And it was actually hilarious with Cody's grandmother. When I was pregnant with our first child, she was really wanting to know the name because she was in her 90s and was worried she wasn't going to make it. And but we were just like, no, we don't want to tell you. And she said, just please don't name that child Caleb. And that was literally one of the names that I had proposed. And she's like, just don't name him something weird like Caleb.
It's not weird.
No,
that was one of my.
She's from Texas, and she was 90, and to her, like, I think things that were biblical or of cowboy origin felt weird, and it was just hilarious because it was like she picked it out of the clear blue sky. Caleb was like, but that's a beautiful name. I love it. I still love it, but it was just so that got nixed, just out of hand, because it's like you're not going to then name your child what your grandmother begged you.
Especially not when it's your husband's grandmother.
Well, and that you love very much, that we both love very much, and would just want to make her happy. So, and I had a dream where I imagined a child and it had a name, and I shared that name with people, and they were like, "Oh God, please don't name your child that." So anyway, after that experience, we were like, "We're not telling anyone.
We're not telling anyone anything.
Here's his name." Well, Rebekah, any last thoughts before we wrap up? I could talk to you obviously for a long time.
I know. Same. No, just that this was so lovely, and I've been looking forward to it for so long.
Me too.
So, thank you for the opportunity, and I could see doing so many more different types of versions. That you could just kind of keep doing different where I'm from.
I'm trying to do one a year. That's my
great idea.
It's like because my birthday's in January, so I'm like, I'm just gonna try to do a new. Eventually, there's gonna be a happy one. That's always my intent when I sit down. This is gonna be a carefree one. Hasn't happened yet, but I'm really I have
maybe
that
one
intention
day
eventually. Yeah. So yes, well, thank you for joining me, Rebekah, and thank you for just being a wonderful friend and writer and person.
Same. I will say, before we go, I mean, a lot of people in my life obviously know about our very special writing group. But we're a really special writing group, and I'm just, yeah, feel so grateful to know you and be able to write with you.
Same.
Yeah. Yeah. It's huge. It's a huge part of my life now. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, have a lovely weekend. Bye,
You
everyone. Thanks so much for
too.
joining us. And thank you, Rebekkah.
Bye.
Bye.